Hey guys, HoodieBee here, and today I want to show you guys my harvest starter and how I've progressed over the week that the league has been out. I do apologize for taking so long with my videos. Normally I aim for a weekly upload at the bare minimum, but life's been quite hectic. And I'm just glad that these problems have finally been sorted out and I can get back to making some videos. This is going to be a quick video, nothing crazy like my gladiator build guide, so sit back, relax, and let's get cracking. Let's start with the pros and cons. League start friendly. This means that we can get to maps with just a 4 link. Now obviously it will feel better and smoother with a 5 link and then a 6 link. Insanely fast mapping. We use whirling blades to zoom across the map, and with a cheap upgrade of 1C you can get Binder's kitchen knife, which will help you spread your poisons and really give you that zoom feeling. We absolutely destroy bosses in maps or bosses that have no phases. Short-term encounters are our bread and butter. And finally, we have great map sustain. And I know that's not really a pro that could be attributed to a build specifically, but I just want to highlight that this specific build is fantastic for mapping. It literally is the king of mapping in my opinion. Yes, I know I'm going to get flamed for that, but it's designed for mapping. It can boss, but mapping is where you really want to make most of your currency with this particular build. And now let's go over why you shouldn't play this build. Firstly, it's extremely expensive to scale, and when I say extremely I mean that as relative. At the start of the league, all the upgrades that you need are going to be unique typically, and will require at least 2 EX, and right now an Exalt is worth about 200 Chaos Orbs, so they are very pricey and will require a lot of playtime to accumulate the currency required in order to buy these upgrades. Another con is that we are very squishy. Dodge is our only real form of defense, and although we do have different forms of defense in our build, such as gaining Fortify with Whirling Blades, it won't really help you from avoiding a one shot unless you dodge it, because our life pool is extremely little. Another con is that some map modifiers can make things a bit difficult. No, not impossible, but difficult. An example of this is enemies have 60% chance to avoid poison, mana cannot be leashed, or physical reflect. They are all map mods that just make the build feel a bit slower, clunkier, or a bit more difficult and will require a bit more effort on your part. Nothing cannot be finished, they all can be done, and that's the beauty of this build. This build can do every single map regardless of any attribute or modifier associated with the map, and that's what makes it such a good mapper. And finally, the biggest turnoff of them all, and actually the most important thing to look at if you're going to play this build or not, is the fact that it's micromanagement heavy. And what I mean by that is that it's going to require you to constantly press your flasks, constantly keep your blade vortex up at 10 stacks, constantly make sure that you've got Fortify with Whirling Blades, constantly make sure that you're moving, constantly making sure that you're literally applying Plague Bearer poison stacks everywhere. It's got a lot of things to remember and a lot of keys to press, so if that's a playstyle that's not for you, then I'll just avoid playing this build because you're not going to have fun, and that's the most important thing, guys, having fun with the build. If you're someone who's looking for a more relaxed style of gameplay, don't go with this build, you're not going to enjoy it. If I haven't managed to scare you guys off the build, then awesome. Let's get to the core build itself. The mechanics of our build is going to be using poison. Blade Vortex is the best way, in my opinion, to stack a high number of poisons on a target very quickly. With no limits in how many poisons you can apply at any given time, you can definitely expect some very strong damage ramp up over time. The Ascendancy choice for our build is going to be the Assassin. The class gives us speed, dodge, and damage, as well as giving us access to some very strong chaos and poison nodes in our tree. For our links and sockets, we have our body, which is going to be our 6th link. We have Val Blade Vortex, Unleash, Poison, Unbound Ailments, Vile Toxins, and Deadly Ailments. If you lack links, then socket what you can in the order provided. The reason we have poison as our 3rd is, generally speaking, when you're leveling, if you choose to use this skill as when you're leveling, or if you're into early maps, you probably won't hit 100% poison right off the bat. It'll take some time to get to that 100% poison, so having poison support really will help you get that poison chance up. In our helmet, we're going to have our auras socketed here, so we have a 4 link here. They don't even have to be linked, you just need 4 sockets available. So, we're going to have Malevolence, Herald of Agony, Flesh and Stone, and Plague Bearer. And just to make a quick note, guys, Plague Bearer isn't an aura, it's a spell that we do utilize to help us supplement our damage even further. I'll explain it a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. Also, I just want to say that you probably won't fit all the auras in just because of the mana reservation cost until you acquire the unique item, the Devouring Diadem. So until then, just use Malevolence and Herald of Agony until then, and if you feel like you're dying too much, then make the switch from Herald of Agony to Flesh and Stone. the blind does really help, and because you're zooming all over the place, you won't really die from far across off the map hits, but typically hits inside a small proximity. Next we have our gloves, which is also a 4-link. We have our curse here, but with two different setups. So the initial setup starting off will be a spell with low cast speed, such as Orb of Storms or Vortex. Then we're going to link that to curse on hit, and then further link that to our actual curse, which is despair, and then we're going to supplement that even further with increased area of effect. The reason we do this is so that we can cover a wider range and therefore drop less orbs or vortexes, and therefore which means less button mashing on our end. Now you don't have to use increased area of effect. I do, or I used to because I liked it, but then when I upgraded my gear, I did switch that out for a golem because I do value the 4% reduction that the chaos golem provides. It's small, but it does help even a little bit. Once you've upgraded your amulet to an Impresence with Despair not reserving any additional mana, the setup will then be Despair, linked to Blasphemy support, linked to Cast when damage taken support, and then linked to either a Chaos Golem, which is what I use, or alternatively you could also use Steel Skin, which is going to be our guard skill of choice for this build. The reason why I don't personally use Steel Skin and opt to use Chaos Golem instead is because I have Steel Skin bound to my left mouse button, so when I'm always walking, I'm always activating it. Sure, that does mean there is some downtime, but I find that because I'm zooming across the map anyway, it's always up when I need it. I guess you could argue that casting damage taken support linked to Steel Skin is a bit more valuable in boss fights when you actually need it when you need it and not just for the sake of using it, but that's a different topic altogether. Next we have our boots, which we're going to socket our keep movement skill, Whirling Blades. Just a note about Whirling Blades, it's not like Dash, you can't use it to climb over ledges or climb down ledges, so try to avoid maps with multiple floors or platforms. Examples of this would be Meza, not too bad, Val Temple, definitely try to avoid, that's very annoying. Promenade you can get away with doing, it's a really good map, so I think you can get away with doing Promenade. Right, so the links are Whirling Blades, Culling Strike for the memes, faster attacks so we can Whirling Blades even quicker, and Fortify. Now I know I said that this build is squishy, but Fortify does help a lot, and let me explain why. So in Path of Exile, there are either two ways you're gonna get ripped. Either one big slam attack, or loads of small attacks just accumulating all at once and killing you. What Fortify does is give us a bit of damage reduction, so because we're zooming, the off chance that you get hit by 2 or 3 things that your dodge didn't manage to mitigate, you're going to be protected from due to Fortify, and you'll probably survive. And you'll see in the clips in the background, I do get chunked quite a bit sometimes, but I recover very quickly because of A, my life flask, and B, because the unique items I've got equipped that I'll be sharing with you guys in a bit do provide a lot of sustain when you're mapping. If you're still hell-bent on using a dash skill and it is your preference, then fine, you can use it, but understand that the links we're going to use are going to be different. So for something like dash, I would definitely pair it with second wind, and then you have 2 free slots to do whatever you want with. I would pair it with a golem combined with culling strike. That way at least you have something that can kill enemies when they're under 10% health, which does help on the big juicy bosses like Cyrus 8 or Uber Elder. It's just a little bit of quality of life, that's all it is. Next we have our weapons, where we're going to socket in our debuffs. Remember, it's a 3-link, so we can only put 3 different sockets in. First we have our Wither, which is our debuff. We're going to supplement that with multiple totems, and then we're going to also supplement that further with Spell Totem. Spell Totem allows the totems to cast Wither, which is what you want, because you don't want to be manually casting that spell, especially with the micromanagement you have to do anyway. And you must use this on bosses. Don't bother using it on mapping, because the way Wither works is that it can stack up to 15 times, and for each stack it inflicts, it will cause the enemy to take 6% increased chaos damage per stack. That means that it's going to take some time to build up, obviously, and because we literally annihilate anything that isn't a boss in like a second to 2 seconds flat, it's quite useless and not quite redundant to use when you're mapping. So when you're bossing in a fight that takes a minute to 3 minutes, like, you know, a Cyrus phase, not really a Cyrus phase, but the whole fight probably takes 5 minutes, but you get what I'm trying to say. When you're fighting a boss where the phases are longed out and drawn out, this buff actually shines and will allow you to do monumentally more damage than you would have done otherwise. That then leaves us with one more weapon with 3 sockets we can do whatever we want in. So earlier I mentioned that I had my guard skill on my left mouse button bound, unlike using it with a cast when damage taken support setup like you would normally do for a guard skill. This is where I have it socketed in. So in my second weapon I've got my steel skin linked with second wind support. This makes it so my cooldown is reduced and I can have steel skin up a bit more often than not. And then in my last socket I've got portal. This is so I don't have to carry any portal scrolls with me, and it's just a bit of quality of life slash utility. You can do whatever you want with it. Now for the gear. So as a League starter, you can use whatever you pick up and it will do just fine. However, eventually you will want to start purchasing some uniques as they are quite strong power spikes. For solo self-found players, some of these are unfortunately gated behind boss fights, so some patience will be required. For our helmet, we're going to go with any rare focusing on life, resistances, and attributes that you will need for your skill gems. Aim for either an evasion base or a hybrid evasion or int base. You might find it difficult matching the intelligence requirement for a pure int base, so those two bases I mentioned before will do just fine for your primary helmet. The upgrade to this is the unique helmet, the Devouring Diadem. This is from the Mastermind boss, Katrina. She drops this as a reward, and its price varies depending on the state of the league. For instance, I paid over 1 exalt for mine, but don't worry, generally speaking the price does fall as time goes on, so if this is a build that you're picking up as a second character, chances are that you won't have to pay as much as I did. For our body piece, any rare body will do. I will however always take preference of a tabula rasa over a 5-link rare piece with stats. This is because it's not difficult to cap our resistances because of the pathing that we take on our tree, which does provide us with a generous amount of resistances. Even now, I am running a tabula rasa because it's doing the job just fine, and I don't mind dying once or twice when I'm mapping with very juiced up maps. An upgrade to this would be any unique that you see fit for your playstyle, or your needs. For example, the Carcass Jack for increased AoE for your Plague Bearer spell and your Blade Vortex blades. A Kintsugi will provide a lot of evasion, which complements us greatly, or even grabbing a Cosprey's Will, which will grant us the ability to add an additional curse to our enemies, which will be great for the gauntlets, which I'm going to go over later because in the end build you do go ahead and apply 2 different curses. The methods of applying 2 curses, there are quite a few ways of going about doing it, this is just one way. A further upgrade to this would be using a Crusader influenced chest piece that has the Explode mod on it. This will literally cause your mapping to become god tier. This is however very expensive, but fear not, I have got a workaround. Next we have gloves. Any rare gloves will do just fine. Focus on life, resistances and attributes. Just to make a quick note, any attribute that I mention will most likely be intelligence. That's literally the only attribute that we're going to be starved for. So 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for any attributes, it's going to be intelligence. Maybe on the off case strength, but that's unlikely. An upgrade to this would be quite a pricey one. It's rather difficult to obtain, that's why it's quite pricey. It's the Azimuth's Gentle Touch. This allows us to explode corpses on death if they are affected with a curse, which they should be unless they are hexproof, as well as ensuring that any enemies near the corpses are cursed with temporal chains. This makes mapping insanely quick. Similarly to how an exploded chest would feel, this just makes the exploded chest a luxury upgrade rather than a power spike. This is the workaround from getting a Crusader's Influence chest. You don't have to get that chest, you can just use these gloves instead and they'll do the job. Also, you have to find out a way to get 2 curses on an enemy. One way is using the Cosprey's Will chest piece, another way is getting an anointment, which is the Whispers of Doom, however this is quite expensive with 3 golden oils, and another way is using one of those weird rings that no one really wants to use. Yeah, don't use those rings. Go with either the anointment or the body piece. Or alternatively, you could just be super rich and get a Crusader's influenced chest piece with a Clody mod combined with a Hunter's influenced chest piece that has the you can now inflict 1 additional curse. It's up to you really, see what's in your budget. Moving on to the boots. Again, any boots focusing on life, resistances and attributes are fine. Try to aim for about 20 to 25% movement speed when you're going through the axe and when beginning your atlas. Now, when you start your atlas and you start progressing through the maps through white maps and yellow maps, at that point you'll probably have some currency saved up. Then you've got the choice to either switch them out for the cheap but very effective as a restep, only if you have your resistances capped without the boots. These are very powerful as they not only give us a decent amount of movement speed, but also the very rare affix chance to dodge spell hits. It's a very solid item that can carry us all the way to endgame if we're satisfied with this option. An upgrade, however, to those people who want even more, is to grab the Hunter's Influenced Rare Boot with at least 30 or 35% movement speed, and with the Hunter's modifier, gain Tailwind on critical strike affix. This combo is typically paired with the gain Elusive on critical strike, which is gated behind a Redeemer Orb, but because we're an assassin that already benefits from Elusive due to our Ascendancy node, we don't need to fork out multiple exalts for this additional upgrade, therefore we can benefit from this slightly cheaper alternative, so win-win. Moving on to our jewellery, starting with the Amulet. Any amulet will work in the beginning. Try to get flat physical damage increases, life and energy shield as affixes. Try not to rely on this slot too much for resistances because we will be swapping it out as one of our first upgrades. Our next upgrade from using any base amulet will be one that I recommend you aim for ASAP due to the high DPS boost that it provides. This amulet is the In Presence Onyx amulet. Make sure that you have the amulet with a purple background or a purple aura around it. This means that it's going to grant us Despair with no mana reservation attached to it if we use it as an aura. What this means is that if we link Despair to Blasphemy support, we can then use it as an aura, and with this amulet equipped, that aura will use no mana reservation at all, which means it's a free curse acting like an aura. Pretty good. Moving on to our rings, we can use literally anything for our rings. Our rings are there to help us cap out our resistances and to also grant us some life and energy shield if we need. If you're looking to upgrade these even further for some odd reason because you want more damage, then grab some with the Hunter's influence on them and then aim for the suffix percentage increased damage with poison and percentage increased poison duration is all in one mod. This is the next step, and I do find this a little overkill, but it does make bossing a lot better for us because we can just dart in, poison lasts for a bit longer, poison does more damage, dart out, etc, rinse and repeat, etc. And then we have our belt. Any belt works. Literally, this slot is the same as our rings, we just use it for additional defenses, and cast speed is always nice if you can grab that too. Ideally you want a Stygian Vice, only so we can slot in an Abyss Jewel. And that Abyss Jewel, we want to specifically get one slot, or one mod. That mod is going to be percentage chance to gain Onslaught on kill. This is important, this is the only way we're going to get Onslaught outside of using a Flask, and we don't want to use our Flask for anything like that. For those wealthy exiles out there who can somehow accumulate massive amounts of currency, then go ahead and grab yourself a Headhunter. This is one of the builds to play with the Headhunter because of how fast you're zooming across the map. Now let's move on to our weapons. We have two weapons. For bossing, we use the Cold Iron Point, we use two of them, and then for mapping, we swap out one of those Cold Iron Points for a Beano's Kitchen Knife. If you can't afford these for some odd reason, even though the Beano's Kitchen Knife is literally 1 chaos with the Cold Iron Point being like 10, then you can use any rare rune knife to supplement it, but you should definitely look to try and get in these two. These are quite core to our build, and when you get the Explodey Chest or the Ascendancy's Gentle Touch, or any mod that can explode corpses, then replace Beano's Kitchen Knife with another Cold Iron Point, and then you'll have a Blade Vortex that's level 26 or 27 if you manage to get to 21 without any problems, and it will do massive amount of damage on any mob. And you can upgrade these even further, but not regularly through replacing them with other items, but instead by corrupting them with Varlobes to gain very desirable implicits. For instance, my Cold Iron Point, one of them has the chance to gain Unholy Might on kill for 4 seconds. This is usually reserved as a cluster jewel notable, and we're not using any cluster jewels this league, and I don't recommend you do until I figure out how they're gonna implement an easier way to get them, because they are very hard to roll, very hard to obtain, and very expensive, and I wouldn't recommend you touch them unless you have a mountain buttload of currency that you're willing to burn in order to roll them, because I guarantee that the mods that you're trying to get probably don't exist on the market. I mean, it's only been 1 week of the league, so it's early sailings right now, but maybe in 2-3 weeks they'll come out, who knows, but right now, don't bother. The flasks that I recommend you use are going to be the Life Flask, Naziri's Promise, Coralito Signature, a Quartz Flask, and a Quicksilver Flask. The Aziri's Promise and the Coralito Signature are going to be our two primary DPS increasing flasks. The Aziri's Promise is going to grant us additional chaos damage based on our physical damage and also some additional chaos leech. The Coralito Signature is by far the biggest increase in DPS when it comes to flasks. The flask provides us with the keystone, the Perfect Agony. This keystone in particular will grant us the ability to critical strike when we poison. Now generally speaking, ailments such as poison do not critical strike, but this keystone makes it so that they do. As well as this, the Coralito Signature will also increase our duration for our poison. This is a big boost to our damage for bossing, not really mapping, but certainly bossing. The generic Life Flask, Quartz Flask, and Quicksilver Flask, we're going to aim to have Bleed, Freeze, and Curse immunity. Shock immunity isn't too much of a problem, so I don't really bother with it. If you're struggling for mana, which you will be until you grab the Devouring Diadem helmet, replace the Quicksilver Flask with a Mana Flask. You'll be slower, but you'll be able to keep up with your mana costs, and you'll be using the Whirling Blade to travel anyway. The reason why I have a Quartz Flask here is because I value dodge a lot. Dodge is our main form of mitigation of damage, therefore increasing that to make sure that we hit the cap is important. A quick section on Plague Bearer. So this spell is the reason why we basically rock at clearing and dealing damage. The way this skill works is that it absorbs poison damage dealt to enemies, and then once you trigger it, that poison damage is released to enemies nearby at a much amplified rate. The more poison stored, the more damage dealt, so it's in your best interest to cap it out and then release it. It does fill up very quickly because of how much damage that we deal, so there's no real reason not to. Let's briefly go over leveling. So, if you've probably noticed, or haven't, that you can't use Blade Vortex until level 32. So, what do we do until then? Simple. We use Caustic Arrow to level. We can pick this up from vendor upon entering town for the first time. We don't have to path any differently to transition into Blade Vortex later on, but we will need 4 regrets or 4 passive tree refunds when you do. The leveling process is fairly straightforward, and you won't be using poison much at all really until you start using Blade Vortex. A falling Caustic Arrow will carry you just fine up till maps, although the damage will start to fall off when you start hitting the Guitarva stage. The links that I recommend for Caustic Arrow are going to be as follows: Caustic Arrow, linked with Mirage Archer, Vicious Projectiles, Swift Affliction, Void Manipulation, and Efficacy. I'll leave some more detailed notes for you guys in the path building notes section regarding leveling. It's very straightforward and nothing you have to stress over. The reason why it's straightforward is because when we use Blade Vortex and we apply poison, poison is based off both physical and chaos damage. Caustic Arrow is based off both physical and chaos damage. Therefore, transitioning from one to the other isn't really too difficult, and the only reason that we go with these boners that we're going to regret out of later is because it just smoothens out the leveling process that much more. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and check out my build guide. It's fairly straightforward and it's a really fun way of playing if you can just get over the fact that you're smashing your keyboard with your hands like literally every 2-3 seconds. Other than that, you'll pretty much do fine, and yeah, that's it from me. Leave a like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see future content from me. See you guys next time.